Today, we're going to be working on a 2008 Mustang Bullitt. We're actually doing a V3 SI Vortech Supercharger kit on this one. We're going to be also doing a Spec clutch, a Wilwood big brake kit on it. We're going to do 6 pistons in the front, 4 pistons in the back, and then we're going to finish this thing off with a set of 20-inch wheels and tires. It is going to be a major transformation. This thing is going to be super sweet. It's a low mileage Mustang. It's never been driven in the rain. Very nice car. We've already kind of started tearing it down just to kind of get prepped for this deal. So we're just going to kind of continue with that today. Do a little bit of tear down, getting it prepped for it. And I got to pull the intake off. We're going to end up doing the clutch and then get the transmission back in. And then kind of continue on with it. So we'll have probably 3 or 4 videos on this build since it's going to be a kind of a long deal. So stay tuned and let's get started. Hey, what's going on everybody? Thanks for checking out the video today. So I'm actually working on this 2008 Mustang Bullitt. On the last video I was working on an old F1 Ford, and I did a little preview on this particular vehicle, which is going to be the next video out. And then this Mercury Zephyr back here, we're also kind of working on it at the same time. I'll get a video out on that one too soon. But we're going to go ahead and dive into this one today. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and get this fuel rail off. We've got some, looks like 8mm bolts here that hold the rail to the intake. I'm gonna go ahead and get these rails off and then we can get to it. So what I gotta do is pop this fuel line off. It's got a safety clip on it right here. So before you, anytime on any vehicle that's fuel injected, especially fuel injected, before you pop any lines off, you want to get the fuel pressure dropped off. You don't want no fuel pressure on there. So on these cars, what you can do is you just unplug the fuel pump control module. It's in the trunk. Or on other vehicles, you can pop the fuse. You can, pull a fuse. You can pull a relay, whatever. These are just as easy to unplug the fuel pump control module, and you basically crank the car up. It might start, it might not. If it starts, it'll die right away, and that way you can get the fuel pressure out of the lines here. It should still have some in there, so I'm gonna just put a rag right here, try to catch it, and then you just use a special tool. These are like a spring lock in here. You just get a tool. You can get these tools anywhere. They got them at O'Reilly's, all the parts, AutoZone, wherever. And basically you have to push it in to unlock that spring, and you walk this off just like that. So you can see some of the fuel came out of there, so I'm gonna just kind of catch it. All right, let's see how easy these come out. A lot of times what I do on rails is I'll get the injector and I'll try to turn it back and forth to free up the O-ring. These have locks on them on the top, so these injectors should stay hooked into the rail. I always like to keep them hooked to the rail, because once you, if you was to pop this off and the injector comes off of the rail, you're gonna have a lot of fuel spillage, because there's gonna be fuel in this rail for sure. So we always try to pop them out of the intake, and then you basically try to drain the rail as much as you can before you pop the injectors out. So, but these, since they have locks on them, you can't really twist this injector too good, because it's got a lock on it right there. So we just gotta kind of pop them up. no problem. Came up really easy. This car doesn't have a ton of mileage on it. It is a 2008. It's been well taken care of, so it's not in bad shape at all. So that came up pretty easy. They typically don't come up that easy. So I'm gonna just kind of lift this up. I'm gonna go sit it over here on the workbench. Yeah, see, we got, now we can get right to them. All right, I see one back here's got a stud on it. It's got a stud on it and has a wiring harness. See if I can get my, get my little curved needle nose in there and pry it up. There it is. See if I can't get down in here. Got a little swivel end on this extension. These things work good. It's got a little swivel end on it, so you have a little bit of walking room there for situations like that. To remove them, I'm going to leave them in the intake. I just want to get that back one out. Let me get these bolts out of here. All right, we got one. So you got one on the towards the inside on the front. You got one towards the inside on the back, and you have one towards the inside right in the middle. And then you've got 1, 2 on the outside. So gotta get these out of here. Okay, so I got this back bolt loose. It's going to stay in there because it's got an O-ring on the bottom of it. That's going to keep the bolt in. I went ahead and pulled this back one completely out, even though I had the O-ring holding it in. All the other ones, they actually pull out. They don't have O-rings underneath. The O-rings I'm talking about are actually on the bottom of the IMRC plate. Those are the plates that run underneath this intake. They're basically flaps that control the airflow, gives you lower bottom end or more bottom end, and then as RPM increases, they open. So anyway, we got to pull the plates off with the intake. I've got everything unplugged. I've got this harness. I actually kind of got it broke loose. There's a bracket back here that I've gotten popped off, and I've got it zip tied here. I've got it zip tied up over here, and I got these all loose, so it pulled it back. Otherwise, we would have a hell of a time getting this intake off, because this harness actually runs right over the top of the bracket that is bolted to the back of the intake and these and the plates here. The bracket is attached to the IMRC module or motor right here, which is also attached to the intake. So it's got everything loose. Okay, looks like it's loose. I'm going to pull this thing up. See if we can get it out of here. See if I can't get a grip on this. There we go. Nice. So I wanted to show you guys, for you guys that didn't really know about the IMRC situation on these Mustangs. So they're basically flaps, and what they do is, since this is considered a long runner intake, I guess you can kind of consider it, you know, you typically don't have very good bottom end or bottom end to mid-range. So what Ford does is they get these plates on here, and if you notice, they're partly blocked. The whole port, you can see the only opening that they have there, and of course it starts with where the fuel injector comes through, and the rest of the port is, I mean, you could really look at that, it's about a quarter of a port that's only showing. So it's kind of like the same situation as a garden hose. If you put your finger over the end of the garden hose and make a smaller hole, you have a lot more pressure and velocity coming out. So I guess what they do here is they have these motors that the PCM controls, and at idle or low RPM, these butterflies, I'm going to call them butterflies, they will start to open. So when you crack the throttle, if you're at low RPM, let's say you're at 2500 RPM, I'm not sure exactly when these start to open, but let's say you're at a low RPM 2500 and you just put it to the floor, you're creating a lot of air coming into the intake, and when they hit these butterflies, it turns into a lot of velocity coming through the smaller hole, which gives you more torque. And as RPM rises, the PCM will start to open these up. And then once they open up, let's see if I can get this to the light here. So once they open up, and it all depends on the load of the engine, the RPM. As they open up, you can see you get full intake port volume, which is more in the upper RPM range. So that's basically what they do. A lot of guys delete these. This plate is actually bolted to the intake, and they've got these O-rings that seal it between there and there. And then here is the motor, I'm gonna call it the motor, that connects to the back of these plates. And like I say, the computer controls this, all right? So a lot of guys will delete these. They actually sell a complete delete kit that removes these and puts another plate on here that doesn't have any of these butterflies in them. And I mean, it's all good, but honestly, it probably hurts the low to mid-range power without having these, unless you have a built motor and you put cams in it, high compression and all that, then it doesn't matter. Or if you're running a motor strictly on high RPM, then yeah, you might as well delete them. I know a lot of guys that run boost, if they put superchargers, they do delete them. Like on this particular build, we probably could do a delete on these, but we're just going to leave it the way it is. You know, that's just going to, you know, create more bottom end torque and mid-range power. Although I'm sure that, you know, the tuner can tune these to come in early or later or whatever. So anyway, just want to give you a little bit of a overview on what they are and what they do. Well, I got the two top bell housing bolts out. I went ahead and cleaned up the top of the head where the intake goes. It was actually really not bad. It was pretty sandy, so the areas that I couldn't get to with the intake on, it was kind of sandy and dirty. So I got my shop vac and actually vacuumed up all the sand so it wouldn't fall into the intake ports. And then once I did that, I got a rag and some brake clean, sprayed brake clean on the rag, and actually wiped all this off. I didn't have to use any emery cloth or anything. It's in really good shape. So yeah, it'll be all nice and clean. And I cleaned up the bottom of the intake, you know, where the plates go, and I got all that cleaned up real good. Made sure the O-ring seals were good. They were all fine. So went ahead and took, like I said, I took these upper bell housing bolts out. I got the O2 sensor bracket moved out of the way, and that way I don't have to worry about getting to the top ones from the bottom. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this transmission out and get this clutch changed. Okay, so I got this thing up in the air, getting ready to get this transmission out of here. So this thing has stock exhaust on it. It's got the stock H pipe with stock catalytic converters. It does have a catback. So I went ahead and lubed up, did a little bit of WD-40 on these bolts here. Shouldn't really be hard coming off since all this has been replaced. And the exhaust is set up pretty good. It's a little bit close on the back. Like it's really close on the back there. But the tips are sticking out the back perfect. Now notice here that it doesn't look like it's in too far. And the reason why is, I guess if they had it slid in, then the tips wouldn't be sticking out far enough, because right now they are pretty much perfect. So if that pipe was to go in further, the tips would be sticking in. So, and then all this is pretty much where it needs to be. There's not enough room for it to go back anywhere any further anyway. So I'm not sure what brand this is, and I'm really surprised. I would say this is probably barely in there, because you can see the area. I'm curious to see, once I get this off, how far that's in there. So what I did is I pretty much got me a Sharpie and I marked it where it was right now here, and also on this side. Same over here. So that way it'll give me an idea of how far these are up in there. If this is not in there very far, this one is definitely in there. I'm going to slide this coupler back further, so got a decent amount of pipe in it from this side and this side. So anyway, that's just, you know, something to kind of look at. I do have to lower it back down because the O2 sensor on the top, the number one O2 sensor, is actually on the H pipe, not the manifold. And I got to lower it down so I can get up in there and unplug it, because it's up high by the bell housing bolts that I took out. The other side, the O2 sensor is on the manifold, exhaust manifold, so I don't have to worry about that. And then of course, I'm going to unplug them, the back O2s here, go ahead and unscrew them, get them out so I don't break them by accident. And I've got the starter coming out. These are so much easier to get to with stock exhaust, man. When these have long tubes, they're not bad to get out. It's just this top bolt. All the mod motors have 3 bolts. They've got one here, one there, and then they got one on the top. You can see it sticking out just a little bit already. I've already loosened it. The top one is the one that's hard to get to. And I've actually came up with I call it the Fango Dango tool that actually gets it out. But this one, don't need it. It comes right out. I just broke it loose, zipped it out with my air ratchet and a swivel head, 10mm, and no problem, comes right out. So I'm gonna go ahead and get these other 2 out and get this starter out of here, and then I'm gonna lower it down. Unplug the O2 sensor, get it back up in the air, get the O2s out, and get this H pipe off of there, and then well, I got the H pipe out. I should say the stock H pipe, or the catalytic converters. So as you can see, I was able to leave the one O2 sensor in there. It wasn't in a way for me to drop it out without breaking it. I'll just kind of show you. So it turned out, try to get a glare off of there. So you can see the lines that I made right there. So it looked like it had about the same distance on this pipe as it did on the stock pipe going in the clamps, which I got one there and I got one down there. So I'm gonna just put them right back where they were. Not a big deal. So as far as this goes, wasn't bad at all. Got the top stud and the bottom stud on both sides. I was gonna kind of video taking that out, but there's no sense in that. I just used long extension, 1/2-inch drive. Probably could have used a 3/8 drive because the bolts wasn't super tight. 15mm deep well and a swivel. And I was able to get up in there. Of course I used my air gun, but could have used a just a ratchet. Did it by hand because they, like I said, it wasn't too tight at all. And once I did that, I was able just to get it out of here. So I actually unbolted these and I slid the clamps back and dropped these down off of the H-pipe. And then once I got the H-pipe loose, I was able to slide the H-pipe back up top here, because they have to actually come back away from the engine cradle. And then I was able to drop it down and take it on out. So not a big deal. So now I'm gonna start on the bolts, bell housing bolts. Already did the top ones. I got 1, 2, 3 on that side. And there's 2 on this side. Up there. Got to do these 2 here. For the block plate, there's 1 there. And 1 there. Once I get those loose, I'm not even going to take the cross member off the transmission. I'm just going to unbolt those 2 bolts there. And those 2 bolts. Leave the transmission cross member attached to the transmission. And then drop it down. Before I do that, I got to go ahead and take the drive shaft out. So I'm going to go ahead and do that next. There's going to be some 10mm bolts back here that I got to take out. These are 12mm, 12 point. There's 4 of them, got to take out. And then should be a 13mm there and 1 there. And there's also spacers on top of this. You can see that spacer up on top. There's 1 there and there's 1 there. So those will fall off. I have to make sure to put them back in once we get this back in there. So these are a little bit heavy and they can be tricky with 1 person. So I'm going to use my screw jack, which, where is it at? Ah, there it is, right over there, that red pole. So I'm going to use that to support one side while I loosen the other, and then drop this thing down. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and get this drive shaft out of here. Got the front bolts out, and I got the back supported with the screw jack. So on this side, you got the parking brake cable. This one's a little bit, it's easy to get to, but I'm gonna go ahead and take this one out first so I don't have to fight with that parking brake cable. And you can actually use 3/8 on this. These are not the torque that tight. Go ahead and take that one out all the way. And see if I can go ahead and push out that spacer so I don't have to fool with that later. Falling on me. This other one out without bopping me in the head. Hold up on it here. See if I can get this spacer out here. drop it down and lift it out. Yeah, that screw jack makes it a lot easier. We gotta get this. I'm gonna go ahead and get this shifter. Deep well. Well, these shifters actually mount to the body, and they have a shaft that runs to the transmission for shifting. Not the greatest design in the world, but anyway, what you can do is I basically took the ball off on top, got the rubber out of the floor, and you can unbolt these two bolts, or these two nuts. They're 10 millimeter. Drop it down, and when you drop the transmission down, even though it's a long handle up there, it will come right down. That's the easiest way of doing it. Or you can leave all that in place, not worry about taking the center console lid off and not worrying about getting the ball off, and then you can actually take it loose here, but you also have to take it loose up there on the transmission, so all this stays put. And I just find it easier to do it this way. It didn't take no time to get the top of the center console off, pull the console out, take the shifter knob off, and the rubber boot. So you don't really have to pull the console out to do the ball, but you have to get the rubber boot off. And you really need to take the rubber boot out of the floor in order for it to have enough room for that whole long shifter to come out. And since we got engine cradle right here, I usually use my air ratchet and a swivel so I can get it away from the old pan. Use a little extension. Don't really need a super long one here. It actually backed out and was trying to go up against the heat shield. What I'm going to do is get these bottom ones out. I'm going to get the floor jack up under here, or I mean the tranny jack. I'm going to go ahead and lower this thing down some. Then I can get to the two top ones without having an issue. I can actually get to them probably through here, but I gotta lower it down anyway. I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of lower it down to get to those. But before I remove them, then I'm gonna have to unhook the clutch line, hydraulic clutch line. And I'm gonna cap it off so we don't lose all the fluid. Well, I got the transmission jack in place. I use these brackets that come on here to kind of hold it in place. I got the front one facing, laid up against the back of one of the bell housing bolts that bolts to the transmission, and I got the front one on this side the same way, and then these are kind of on the back side of it. So, because I'm going to lower it down and tilt it as I'm lowering it down, and I don't want the transmission to slide off, so I've got these plates on the back side of the transmission. I'm going to go ahead and lower it down some and put a strap around it, a ratchet strap, and that way it just holds it in place. I went ahead and removed these two. Go ahead and get these other two out of here. As I'm lowering it down, I'll tilt this back too so it stays even. And then of course the shifter's coming right out of the hole.
Keep it adjusted there so it stays even with the bottom of the transmission. This is another reason why it's helpful to take the intake off. That way when it comes down, the intake won't hit the back of the intake won't hit the firewall. So I think that's as far as I'm going to take it for now. Go ahead and put a strap on it. There's a couple of wraps on this before it gets tight. If you don't wrap them, a couple of wraps before they get tight, they'll slip right out. So that's about it. I'm not going to go any tighter. I don't really need to. Little special tool I use to pop that clip out. So it's just a pick set. This one's got a little bit longer of a handle. It's got a little curve on the end. You can actually get up in there. There's a clip that pops in, and you have to pull the clip back. You don't have to take it all the way out. It actually has, the way it's designed is it won't come all the way out. It will once you take it off, you can actually get it out. But the way it's designed is it'll actually pop back. It's got two ears on it that keep it locked in place. But once you pop it back like that, I can pull that clutch line right out of there. And then you pop the clip back in, and then when you're ready to put the clutch line in, you put it in, and it opens and pops it back into the groove on the clutch line. So got that done. All right, I got caps here. I want to cap this clutch line off. I got 3 different sizes here. So once I pop it off, I'm gonna lose some brake fluid out of there, but I'm gonna put these caps on. Let's get one of the caps will fit. What I usually do is I'll use my needle nose, my long needle nose. That's a bend to them. That way I can get up in there, grab a hold of it and pull it up. There we go. See, it pops right up. Then get this whatever size I need. Looks like that's it right there. Now I got it lowered down, I can get to this top one here. Go ahead and take this one out. Yeah, this one here is the standard length of all of them. So the only ones that are longer are these 2 here. That's probably where the dowel pins go. Yeah, all right. And this is where the other dowel pin is, so this one will probably be longer too. So it's good to mark them. I marked them on the bell housing. Just put a mark on each side, and that's where the 2 long ones will go. Well, just about got this thing out. I was able to bring it back to clear the input shaft going into the clutch. Got it tilted down to clear as I was bringing it down, as you can see, I was bringing it down and tilting it back. And we are going to come straight down now. I want to leave it tilted just like this. Move it out of the way, go ahead and change the clutch, because that way it'll be in the exact same position to go back in. I'll lift it up, and then as I can actually jack it up and bring the back up, and then just shove the input shaft right into the clutch. And then once I get it completely level, even with the motor, I can stab it home. And there's the clutch. Well guys, I'm gonna go ahead and end it here. I don't want to stretch this video out too long. It's already about 34 minutes long. I'm gonna call this part 1, and we're gonna pick up part 2 with replacing the clutch, pilot bearing, slave cylinder, and then stuffing the transmission back in.
All right, I do appreciate you guys checking out this video, and be sure to watch part 2. We'll catch you on the next one.